Okay, I'm going to draw some simple trees on my Fabriano 100% cotton cold pressed paper, just using a simple pencil. Make your trees fatter and skinnier, however you want them. You don't want them super close to each other. You want to be able to have some space in between them. And you can make some fatter and skinnier. I like odd numbers, so I like 5 trees. It just looks more pleasing to the eye and composition wise. And I'm just going straight down and have the actual paper in a vertical here. This is a Fabriano cotton, 100% cotton cold pressed paper block. Now I'm just taking some cadmium yellow deep and loosening up with some water, grabbing some Prussian blue, mix them together. So I have them ready to go. I have some yellow and I have some greens. I add a little burnt umber to my green to make it a little more duller, tone it down a little bit from the bluish green color. It's just a personal preference for me. You can do whatever color you want. Now I'm going to go in with just water on the brush with a Princeton Neptune number 12 series here. It could be any kind of brush that you want. It's easy for you to manipulate. Don't use a tiny brush, please. Just use a really big brush. It holds a lot of water to make this a lot faster and easier for you. If you use a smaller brush, it's going to take you a lot longer. And what's going to happen is that the water will dry and you can't do the wet on wet technique while it's dry. You have to go back and do it again. You know what I mean? So here I'm putting the water in between the trees. Not on the trees, in between the trees, and then on the bottom ground where the ground is for the trees. And then I'll be taking my colors and I'll be blending them and putting them in where the water is. So it's wet on wet technique with watercolor. This is one of the techniques of watercolor, playing with wet on wet. So here I'm using a Neptune brush. Now I'm going to grab some yellow paint. I kind of put it in the middle of like those trees, kind of going across in the middle here. And that'll start blending in some of the greens, and maybe have some other colors as well. Again, you don't have to do the same colors as me, but this is how I want to start. I want to start with some yellows. I'll be blending in some orange. Here I'm using some cadmium red light. I'll grab some brilliant orange too, kind of play around with the orange. And put that, again, where it's wet, in between the trees. Using my big old floppy Neptune brush. Number 12, of course. And I'm just placing it in and around the trees where it's wet and damp. I'm having fun where I'm going to play colors. It doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of play around with the colors. Like again, you don't even have to choose to use yellow and orange. You could use, if you wanted to put some little bit of red. I always said to use the red towards the end though. I'm going back in and adding some green here that they already pre-mixed, because remember, we want the paint ready to go once you put the water down the paper. You don't want to be putting the water down the paper and then grabbing the paint and then mixing afterwards, because then the water is going to dry. So here I'm putting a lighter green in the bottom around the trees, going up and down. I'm just going to use some wiggle motion, making like grass kind of motion, up and down, back and forth with my brush. Adding little browns, little reds, little yellows, playing with, all that good stuff. You can play whatever color you want. You can even have like purples in there. I just it's kind of fun. This is nothing like serious. You just, throwing paint around wet on wet and seeing what happens. You can use some bright colors too. You can use some turquoises, a little like peacock blue, make it a little brighter green than this. Now I'm adding in that deeper green. I'm going to go grab some more deeper green. I'm grabbing some Paynes gray, throwing that in there as well. We can make it purple and throw that in there. It's just going to give you some more depth in between the trees, and that's why I'm putting a dark color. So it's like the background of the trees kind of in the foreground, that's in the background. It's kind of receding, so it doesn't look flat. It has some dimension and some depth to it. And I'm just kind of putting in like that band there, but I will go up and down, maybe add some grass by using the brush, making like movement up and down, create some kind of grass movement, which I'm doing here. Wiggle back and forth, up and down on the tree, all that good stuff. You're just playing around with colors. Now that it's wet, you can just bleed in all the colors you like. Like I said, you can add some orange, you can add some yellow, you can add some blues, you can make more bluish greens. I'm going to just tap in some greens around here, have them bleed and blend into the oranges and yellows. Again, you're creating more depth and interest by doing all these things with all the colors. Not necessary, but kind of necessary, because you want some interest. You don't want this plain old flat yellow band going across, plain old flat orange band going across. It's wet and damp, so you can bleed and blend different colors in those, and it creates a nice little nuance of texture and color and depth. And here, like I'm saying, I'm adding whatever's on my palette. I'm just playing with at this point. Just grabbing some medium greens and lighter greens, putting them in between those trees. Now you can really see the trees, see? I do like 5 trees. I think odd numbers are great. So you can do maybe 3 big trees, 5 trees, maybe 2 super fat trees and 3 skinny trees. Change it up. You know, play around with all the colors. I'm going to mix some purples now. I'm using ultramarine blue deep, and I'll use like a magenta or even a bright rose. And since I had a lot of paint mixed in with them, it was red around there, it's a little bit like more of a burgundy purple. But it's okay, because purple, just adding some, like, again, more color, just adding some more depth of color. Almost looks black, but it's not. It's purple in there. So that's the kind of beautiful thing about that. And purple is the complementary color to yellow, so it just really complements the colors. It really makes them stand out. And then I do that movement back and forth, so you're getting that grass kind of scenario, moving it up and down with my brush. You know, I'm going to remove the color and I'm going to play around with some more greens in the bottom area. So I went back and add some yellows and some Prussian blue, mushing it around, maybe add a little bit of burnt umber. And I'm going, again, back and forth, up and down, zigzag movement to create grass. It's just, I could grab some water on my brush, take some paint off my palette. I want to make a lighter green going around here. Just playing around with all the greens, filling all that white area in. You know, you can tap in some oranges. Like I said, play with the browns. If you want to make more neutral tones, that's great too. Like, you know, beiges and browns. Don't have to follow exactly how I'm doing. I'm just showing you how I play around with the color. And that's the whole beauty of it. It's just all about color and fun. So I'll keep doing this, and I thought it was a little overloaded, so I'm lifting the color. So I'm taking the wet, damp, clean brush, and I'm taking off the paint and tapping it back on a paper towel. It's a lifting technique. It's a great technique. It kind of gives it more of like an atmospheric, a little more kind of abstract kind of feel quality, or even like this sun coming behind there. I just want to change it up. I wasn't happy with it. It was too saturated. It just kind of felt like it needs another dimension to it, right? So that's what I do. I'll go and play it with lifting and putting some color in. Maybe I thought it was too much yellow and I want to lift it and add some more green, which I'm doing here, a little bit of that. You know, have fun with all that stuff. It's how you want to paint it, you know. Sometimes you want to lift it, sometimes you want to leave it. You know, add some more colors like I'm doing here on the bottom. Get a little more depth, adding in some darker greens, more Prussian blue. Go right in there and go back and forth with your brush. You get this zigzaggy back and forth, up and down, zigzag. But don't go up and down like a soldier. You know, left to right to left, left to right, right to left, so that it has movement. It doesn't look like this weird soldier grass. Because grass doesn't look like that. Look at grass in nature. It's not moving one way straight. It's, you know, back and forth. And here I'm lifting on the bottom. Kind of looks like a little bit of bokeh if you did this when you're lifting like there. I just wanted a little more dimension to the painting. I felt like it was just, I don't know, lacking something. And that's just intuitive for me, how I paint. You know, you might have loved the way it is and just go with that, and that's fine. I just felt like it needed something and I couldn't figure out what. So lifting is what made me feel better. You got to play with this stuff, people. You don't know until you actually try it, right? That's what I do. I play with my paint. Also, when it's damp, not super wet, you can take a credit card, you can scrape up and make wonderful grasses. You know, you can even use this, if you use a small painting, this could be scraped up to create the birch tree itself. I'm scraping here back and forth, and you're creating like these lovely grasses. When it's damp, not when it's super wet. If it's super wet, when you scrape up, the paint folds right back into where you scraped, which is great if you want to do like veins and leaves or kind of like texture on trees. But I don't recommend it if you want to have like wonderful white type grasses going on. And I'm scraping up from the bottom that's already kind of almost dry and create some fun grass. Now, one side of the credit card is a little bit thicker than the other, so you create skinny and fatter ones. You just play around with all that. And I do like a to the jerky up to the right movement or up to the left movement, back and forth. Like I said, you got to play with this stuff. Now I'm going back in and I'm taking ultramarine blue deep and burnt sienna, my two go-to colors to make grays. The more blue gray, the more burnt sienna, the more brown. And that will be the side of the trees on the left. I'll put like a wash going down wet on dry. I'm using the Princeton number 12 aqua, a little more control with this brush, not as floppy. And I'm just going to go on the left side, but kind of like almost halfway on the tree, going all the way down, like a medium gray, you know. And you can blend it if you wanted to do wet on wet color. I mean, just wet water first and then put that on. You can. It will blend across the tree. So I find it's better to just kind of paint the wet on dry, and then you can go let it seep in a little bit in the paper, and then go in and add some water and kind of mush the color across like I'm doing here. Otherwise, you know, it just all blends kind of going across, and I don't want it to do that. I want that highlight happening on the right hand side. So I'm adding in this, again, that blue, ultramarine blue deep, and the burnt sienna, and depending on how much each color of each, you're going to have a bluer gray, and if it's less water, it's going to be even darker, right? So while it's wet and damp, we can go back in and some mixing up color, and then we're going to paint this a little bit darker. We can put those little notches in the birch tree, you know, going from left to right to left, and put little dark notches, playing around with all those out. Maybe make it a little more brown by adding more burnt sienna. I like a little more brown color. It can't be all gray and white. There's more nuance to that in the tree. There's some brown notches and some gray ones. So I'm adding in some burnt sienna. It's a lot of fun. You just, where it's wet, you can just kind of tap and move it around. You can play around with all of this all day long. You see how I'm just going back and forth, moving it, and then taking the brush to go across to get that notch that kind of, you see that the quintessential birch tree notch that goes across, kind of like almost like a smiley face, but it's a little, you don't go straight across, have a little curve to it. Because remember, the tree is not straight and flat. It has, it's a, you know, it's rounded, so you have to have that rounded kind of little notch going across. And I always kind of put it a little bit darker on the bottom too, because it's grounded going towards the ground. So you kind of wash in some color going on the bottom a little bit darker. And here I'm just going to do this in all the trees. You see I'm just notching it. Add a little water here. I'll go back and forth, add some water, and I'll blend in some grays and some browns just to give it, you know, a little bit of interest. Make it interesting. That's all you're doing here. Washing in the color. Because I would let that first wash kind of already dry and then go on back and blend. So I still see that highlight. I don't want to lose that highlight. So if you're just starting out painting watercolor, that's why I suggest you do like the half tree and then kind of blend in, because you might lose that white highlight in the right, which is basically the paper. It could blend in and you can still kind of see it, or you can lift it, but I always feel like that's the best way to go. So here I'm adding the darker color and the notches. It's just, you know, depending on how, don't go so dark. I always say start light and then build and then get dark. If you go full on dark tilt on any of this stuff, yeah, you're missing the nuance which you want. You want some mediums and some darkers and some light and the trees everywhere. It makes it much more interesting. And then I'll pull out little branches. Of course, that's going to be much darker, almost blackish, but it's basically using those same two colors. You can go use a Paynes gray. It's a lot easier for you than if you're having difficulty mixing those two colors and making it that deep dark grayish black. But I feel like you just take it right out of the tube and you can get those two colors. More blue than the brown to get that like gray, dark, kind of black kind of tone. And I'll just do those notches and I'll add some more branches on every single tree. It's a lot of fun. You could sit here and do this, put some music on in the background, you know, notch away. I'm grabbing some Paynes gray just for the heck of it, just to get some more nuance of grays in there. This takes a little bit of time, and then just, like I said, pull out the branches, going across, up and down. Now, I wouldn't put a branch in the bottom. Usually you see the branches going kind of like 3/4 way up. You know, you don't want to put a branch way down in the bottom, going towards the ground. You don't see birch trees that have branches that low. Sometimes you might. I don't know. I haven't seen them, but you could. I mean, maybe I've not seen all the birch trees in the world, so I don't know. And I've used this brush again for some of the simple branches, but I'm going to go in and grab another brush in a few minutes just to get the beautiful, delicate branches, which is like a liner brush, one of my favorite brushes. See how I'm just playing in with the notches, going in with the color, back and forth, boom, 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 darker gray, all that wonderful stuff. So you know what I'm doing here. All right. So you fill all your notches, you put the colors in, get a little bit dark on the bottom, and you're going to grab a liner brush. This is my Princeton No. 4 Umbria series liner brush. They have a bunch of liner brushes in many different series. And again, with the two colors, and I'm just pulling out, making these wonderful branches. They make great little ditzy branches and grasses. It's my favorite go-to brush for all this good stuff. going around here, filling it all in the branches. And then I'll go down to the bottom and I'll start putting in some grasses with this brush. It's one of my favorite brushes. I actually think I need to buy another one. I think I've used it so much that I'm wearing it down. And someone had asked me before, how often do you change your brushes? Well, it's how often do you use your brush? So I use a Neptune number 12 a lot. So I would probably get that changed out every 6 months. It's a pretty cheap brush, maybe even less than 6 months, depending if it's starting to wear it. If the tip's gone, I get a new brush. So I'm, again, making those two colors, beiges and browns, and maybe add some deeper grays and greens in the bottom. Just making some wonderful little grasses with this brush. Now, again, please don't do soldier grass where you're going dump, 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 up and down. You want it to move right to left, left to right, have a bend in them, all that good stuff. Otherwise, it's just boring soldier grass. You want it to look more like nature. You're kind of taking the brush and you're going up and over, bend it a little bit, going up, over, and down. All that good stuff. And I'll mix up some greens again, Prussian blue, yellow, and I'll put some green grasses in there as well. It can all be brown, right? Yeah, and the same movement. You're just kind of bending it, moving it back and forth. I kind of do it in clusters too. Again, you don't want these little grasses that are going across the page, soldier, soldier, soldier grass. You want grasses that are kind of in a cluster, moving left to right, having some movement to them. It just makes no sense to have soldier grass. You know what I'm talking about, all in a line. You kind of bend over and up and down, all that good stuff. And then, of course, different values. You want to add some deeper greens. It can't all be the same value as well. Make it more interesting that way by adding the different values of the grasses and the greens. Can be some browns in there. You can add some Paynes gray in there. All that fun. Good stuff. And I just love playing with the liner brush. You can just put the music on and go for days with the liner brush. I'll put some grasses up in here. Play around with it. Have fun. Put some grasses way in the back. You can just spend days upon days with the liner brush. It's really, really great. So now, let's have a little bit of fun. Let's take some paint, like almost right out of the tube. I'm using my number 12 aqua lead brush. Loosening up the paint. I'm just going to splatter it. I basically take my brush and tap it on top of like another brush or a pencil or a pen and splatter it that way. I don't like freehand loose. I just basically, see how I'm tapping it? I'm tapping it on top of another brush. Doing it on the top and the bottom. The more looser the paint, the bigger splatters, etc. Top and bottom. Have fun with orange. I'll grab some yellow and I'll put the yellow in there. And just keep having fun. And it can be some reds in there. You can throw some purples, turquoise. And like I said, depending on the brush and how wet that paint is, the splatters will be smaller. You can just go in and tap it as well. I'm going to go tap, tap, tap. Taking the brush and tippy tap. I love my tippy taps. Tap around, tap all over. Yeah, have fun. It has a lot of energy when you're splattering and get that like energy. But tapping is good too, because you want to actually place it in certain areas too. Sometimes when you're splattering, it's not placed where you want it, so you have to kind of make it go there, right? And so I'm just tapping up the top, and I'll probably tap a little bit on the bottom, all that good stuff. The splatter gets them tinier, the tapping makes them thicker, and, I'm going to highlight that gray area that's kind of deep and grab some vertier blue, which is a great blue. You can play around with splattering that. I wouldn't do that everywhere. It's just going to be a complement to the yellow. Just a little bit of that on the paper. All that good stuff, Splat, splat, splat. I love playing with color. It could be purple. It could be pinks in there. Your imagination can go wild. And like I said, green. I'm using like a nice Kelly type green. Get a little bit wetter. Makes bigger splotches. And you can even just go back in when this is dry and kind of put in some nice green grasses. You can have fun with this. Many colors, but this is so simple to make a nice little beautiful birch tree painting. There's not much effort involved. And depending on your skill level, you're going to make your trees skinnier, bigger, fatter, whatever. I think it's simple just to draw it and kind of go in here and go back in and splatter it. Add some colors, add some grasses back here, I can put some greens up in here. Might tap some greens back in here. A little bit here and there. So the trees have changed color, but we still have some greenery in there. Some energy of greens happening. Kind of really fun, sweet. Splatter the green back here. Super fun. Just a different way of looking at it. I might go back in here and just kind of put some swipes of green. Just fun color. I'm even need some browns. Just kind of move your brush, wiggle it around. Get some like nice, fun, loose energy taps. Oh, I don't know if I like that one in the middle. I might remove that. Sometimes it happens. We don't like one. There you go. If you wanted to make this color area stand out a little bit more, you can just take some bright yellow in here and kind of tap a little bit of that color, even some of the brilliant orange. That would really pop over that nice purple gray. We'll push down a little bit bigger kind of blobs. Unexpected bright color thrown in there. Really kind of sweet and fun. Like the leaves falling down from up top. And that's that. Those are our birch trees. I hope this was fun. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Have fun with color. Don't have to just do yellows and oranges. You can throw in some purples in there and some turquoise, whatever you want to do. All right, guys. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.